Larry Fitzgerald scored the go-ahead touchdown with just 2 minutes and 38 seconds left in the fourth quarter of Super Bowl XLIII, but the Steelers were about to put a drive together. And what happened next would be one of the top 10 throws and catches in Super Bowl history. Today, we are going balls deep into the 2008 NFL football season. The 2008 NFL season kicked off, as it always does, with last year's Super Bowl champion raising the banner. The New York Football Giants got to relive their upset victory over the 18-0 New England Patriots right before they started off their Super Bowl defense with a 16-7 win over Jason Campbell's Washington Potato Skins. The Giants won 11 of their first 12 games to start the 08 season, thanks in part to a Pro Bowl season by Eli Manning, 2 separate 1,000-yard backs in Derek Ward and Brandon Jacobs, and 12 sacks from All-Pro defensive end Justin Tuck. But they went into a tailspin and lost 4 of their last 5 to end the regular season, and you probably know what triggered it. It was a trigger, literally.
Where did you get that shit? It's my mom.
Wide receiver Plaxico Burress accidentally shot himself in the leg at a nightclub, ending not only his season, but his whole Giants career. The man who caught the game-winning touchdown pass of Super Bowl XLII might have cost the New York Giants a chance at Super Bowl XLIII, but we'll get to that later. Over in Philly, they had a new wide receiver in town, a second-round draft pick from Cal by the name of Deshaun Jackson. When he wasn't celebrating prematurely, Jackson was a much-needed weapon for the Birds, unlike the weapon that Plaxico was keeping in his pants. And definitely unlike the weapon I keep in my pants. Unsanitary underwear. The Dallas Cowboys had owned the NFC East a year earlier, but after the shame of their divisional round loss in 2007, where they trailed the Giants by a mere 4 points for 13 and a half minutes in the fourth quarter, they couldn't score and they couldn't rebound in this season. And as Brandon Jacobs told us in that game, time is just something you violently throw a football at. Dallas followed up a stellar season with a mediocre 2008. A mid-season trade for Lions receiver Roy Williams failed to pan out and became an all-time horrible trade in NFL history, and Terrell Owens, who still managed 1,000 yards, was showing signs of decline at age 35. Wait, back up. I mentioned that Roy Williams was traded from the Lions? They already had a number 1 receiver by the name of Calvin Megatron Johnson, but it didn't help them from capturing infamy in 2008. There's one image that defines the Lions' 08 season. And of course, it's Dan Orlovsky running out of the back of the end zone for a safety in what was eventually a 2-point game. A loss to the Vikings. That was just their 5th of 16 losses that season. The Lions played 5 quarterbacks that year, and none of them managed to throw more touchdowns than interceptions. Fast forward to the year 2022, and Twitch, which of course didn't exist back then, is still roasting Dan Orlovsky for that play. In fact, the number of people who haven't roasted him for that play is probably less than the number who have. Time, though, actually has been kind to those Lions. That terrible season earned them the rights to draft Matthew Stafford, a gunslinger out of Georgia who nearly gave Colin Cowherd a heart attack when his backwards hat-wearing ass won a Super Bowl for the Rams in the 2021-2022 season. The Browns spared the 08 Lions of their singular shame when they too went 0-16 in 2017. Meanwhile, Orlovsky's blunder has been matched by one Jimmy Garoppolo, who committed the self-safety in a loss early in the 2022 season to the Broncos. I'm not sure if the safety or the loss to Denver is more embarrassing. The other big story in the NFC North involved a changing of the guard in Lambeau. After one of the most obnoxious storylines of all time, when Brett Favre retired and unretired in the offseason, The Packers committed to Aaron Rodgers as their quarterback in 2008. While the team fell from 13-3 to just 6-10, there was no mistaking that Rodgers was the guy. The fourth-year QB out of Cal tossed 28 touchdowns, and the Packers actually scored the fifth most points in the league, but lost 7 one-score games. They're like a reverse 2022 Broncos who have lost, I think, 8 one-score games because their offense scores so few points. Meanwhile, the old dick pick slinger had been shipped to New York to play for the Jets for a conditional draft pick that would later be flipped and turned into Clay Matthews. But halfway through the season, it looked like the Jets had won the trade, advancing to 8-3 after an upset of the previously undefeated Tennessee Titans. The Jets, however, sputtered down the stretch and eventually conceded the AFC East to the Miami Dolphins, who finished 11-5. It looked like the Finns were dead in the water after an 0-2 start, but they flipped into extra gear when they unveiled the new Wildcat offense, which utterly confused the New England Patriots on their way to a 25-point drubbing of Matt Castle's team. My favorite NFL tradition has always been the Miami Dolphins inexplicably foiling the Patriots every year, no matter what. Wait, Matt Castle's team in New England? That's right, despite not having started a game in his entire career at USC, the Patriots spent a 7th rounder on Matt Leinert's backup in 2005. The Patriots clearly targeting a backup quarterback already used to playing behind a very handsome man. That proved a wise investment when Tom Brady tore his ACL in the early going on a Week 1 matchup with the Kansas City Chiefs. Castle came in, won the game, and eventually led the Patriots to an 11-5 record, which, by a strange twist of fate, was not good enough to qualify for the playoffs. Castle's performance in 2008 paved the way for all the Brady haters out there to give him the nickname System Quarterback. Unfortunately, Brady's injury led to 2 things. 1, his relationship with trainer Alex Guerrero, who taught Brady how to be pliable by, properly stretching and eating healthy, which led to his disgusting NFL longevity. And 2, the Brady rule, to ensure no defensive player could ever tackle a quarterback low. That injury has led to more roughing the passer penalties than Clay Matthews Sr.'s testicles. Now, the AFC featured 2 wildcard teams with 11 or more wins, the 12-4 Indianapolis Colts and the 11-5 Baltimore Ravens. Peyton Manning delivered his 3rd MVP season, throwing what was actually a pretty modest 27 touchdowns and 12 picks. That might not even get you a Pro Bowl these days. By comparison, that season, Philip Rivers threw 34 touchdowns, fewer picks at 11, and for more passing yards, but only received 2 MVP votes. Drew Brees also 34 touchdowns and 1,000 more passing yards than both Rivers and Manning, and got 0 MVP votes. And like Rivers, he too had an 8-8 record. I think everyone knew that Peyton Manning, with just 27 touchdowns, was 90% the reason the Colts had a 12-4 record. Indy, though, was bested in the AFC South by a Titans team powered by Smash and Dash, the running back duo of Chris Johnson and Lindale White, who combined for 2,000 yards and 24 touchdowns on the ground. They now have a podcast together, and it's nice. That made life easy for 36-year-old QB Kerry Collins, who started most of the season over Vince Young, who was just a couple years removed from Rookie of the Year and the Madden cover honors, or one of the worst Madden curses ever. But something incredibly important happened in Cincinnati. Chad Johnson legally changed his name to Ocho Cinco. Not great timing, considering his 540 receiving yards that year was his 2nd lowest as a bungle.
Child, please.
But the other Bengals' notable achievement was tying the Eagles on November 13th, which was the first tie game in 4 years. Remember, before 2010, the overtime had sudden death rules from the get-go, meaning any score wins the game, which is why ties used to be more cherished as a true rarity. Now, the Ravens, on the other hand, were led by a rookie, Delaware's Joe Flacco, whose unibrow and mesmerizing deep ball were enough to pilot the Ravens to an 11-5 season in their first campaign under new head coach John Harbaugh, who had been Philly's special teams coach the season prior. Joe Flacco wasn't even supposed to start the season, but Troy Smith fell ill before the opener and his eliteness popped. Former Ravens QB Trent Dilfer may have coined the term Dilfer's dimes, but unlike Dilfer, Flacco could actually throw those dimes. And like Dilfer, he eventually won a Super Bowl for Baltimore. Also, like the name Dilfer, Joe Flacco magically morphed into a Dilf once he removed that uni. Now the Ravens had a week 2 bye, which is just really weird and cruel. I forget the NFL used to do that. The Ravens were one of 2 teams to make the playoffs with a rookie QB at the helm. On his first ever pass attempt in the NFL, Matt Ryan threw a 62-yard touchdown to Michael Jenkins, and newly acquired running back Michael Turner rushed for nearly 1,700 yards as head coach Mike Smith dragged the Falcons out of the depths of hell and into the wildcard round. They might have won the NFC South if not for an early season loss to the 12-4 Carolina Panthers, who, like the Titans, were paced by the stellar rushing duo of D'Angelo Williams and Jonathan Stewart, one of my favorite combos to watch, who did combine for a staggering 2,351 yards on the ground. Carolina kicked off their season with the buzzer beater against the San Diego Chargers and hit the ground running under head coach John Fox and QB Jake Delhomme. Those Chargers? Well, they started the season 4-8, including brutal losses like the one to the Panthers, and a week later when the Broncos took advantage of an oopsie by official Ed Hochuli and won a shootout with a touchdown and a 2-point conversion, both by Eddie Royal on the exact same play, thrown by one Jay Cutler. Denver and San Diego were headed on different trajectories, though, through 13 games. The Broncos were 8-5 thanks to Pro Bowl seasons from third-year QB Cutler and wide receiver Brandon Marshall, forgotten beast. The Chargers still had their bevy of weapons, and Philip Rivers was shot-putting them the ball with deadly accuracy. Denver's margin narrowed as they slipped up, and eventually it was Denver-San Diego for the division on Sunday Night Football to conclude the regular season. It did not go well for my Broncos. And that was the end of Jay Cutler and Mike Shanahan in the Mile High City, as Shanahan was fired the following offseason and replaced by fuckboy Josh McDaniels, who went on to trade away Jay Cutler for Kyle Orton and ruin my damn franchise for a couple years. The Chargers, though, they wrestled back the West, but in the NFC, an unlikely contender was emerging from the shadows. Second-year head coach Ken Whisenhunt had given the reins to Kurt Warner, who was now 10 seasons removed from his storybook run to a Super Bowl title with the St. Louis Rams. The Cardinals were 7-3, lost 4 of their next 6, but claimed the division essentially by default when the 49ers, Seahawks, and Rams all finished below 500. Warner tossed 30 touchdowns, 23 of them to the electric duo of Anquan Boldin and Larry Fitzgerald, but their defense often negated that high-powered offense, once allowing 6 touchdown passes from Brett Favre in a Week 4 loss to the Jets. Even with the poorest defense, though, Ken Whisenhunt had brought a division title to Arizona for the first time ever. Whisenhunt's old team, the Pittsburgh Steelers, were in their second year under young head coach Mike Tomlin, who were polar opposites. The Steel Curtain had reemerged in
Western Pennsylvania, blah, 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 blah.
And All-Pros James Harrison and Troy Polamalu were ready to make sure that this postseason, Pittsburgh wasn't going down easy. Not going down easy also sounds like what a night with never mind. The 2008 playoffs began in the desert, where the Cardinals' defense stiffened and shut down Offensive Rookie of the Year quarterback Matty Ice and running back Michael Turner, and the Falcons' run game. Atlanta nearly mounted a fourth quarter comeback, but Kurt Warner iced the game with a 23-yard pass to an unlikely hero, backup tight end Steven Spatt. match on 3rd and 16. That night, 12-4 Indy had to fly all the way to San Diego to take on the 8-8 Chargers. It was a tight battle. Peyton Manning caught the Chargers D sleeping and threw a 72-yard touchdown in the third quarter. But Nate Keating tied the game with 31 seconds left, and in overtime, Darren Sproles called game. To close out the divisional round, the wild card Philadelphia Eagles beat the Vikings on the strength of an Asante Samuel pick six, and the Baltimore Ravens, like the original Tiger Kings, euthanized the Wildcat with a 27-9 victory in Miami. Oddly, Joe Flacco was nearly euthanized years later when Kiko Alonso tried to decapitate him on national TV. The divisional round featured a trio of major upsets. On Saturday, the Panthers and Titans, two mirror images of one another, both fell to wildcard teams, the Cards and the Ravens respectively. Matt Stover ended the Titans season, and later that night, Jake Delhomme melted down with 6 turnovers while Larry Fitzgerald feasted on the Panthers secondary. And to close out the divisional round, the Eagles put the final nail in the Giants' coffin, and the Steelers pulled the plug on the Chargers' late season surge. You needed some surge protectors, didn't you, old Philip Rivers? 4 teams remained: the Ravens, the Steelers, the Cardinals, and the Eagles. One game was a shootout that featured 3 Larry Fitzgerald touchdowns, and the other was a defensive slugfest that was decided when Troy Polamalu picked off Joe Flacco and traversed half the field on his way to a touchdown that would send Pittsburgh to the Super Bowl. Yinzas everywhere rejoiced. Super Bowl 43. The Steelers were looking for their 6th ring, and the Cardinals were looking for their first in franchise history.
Is it true that if you don't use it, you lose it?
Is that a serious question?
No, it wasn't.
It was also John Madden's last game in the broadcast booth, and these two teams were nice enough to send him off with an all-time classic game. Although this game was so close, many of the loyal retirees rooting for the Cardinals did not survive the game. Age plus a heart condition and a nail-biting Super Bowl is a recipe for a lot of old people deaths. 2 very unlikely players found the end zone in the first half. Backup running back Gary Russell hit pay dirt for the Steelers, and tight end Ben Patrick snagged a touchdown in the second quarter. Now, this game really hinged on one famous play. The Cardinals were driving to score right before halftime, and then James Harrison made one of the greatest plays in Super Bowl history. It almost sounds like the late John Madden predicted the pick before the infamous throw.
Well, they can pick down here.
But I think he was pointing out that the Cardinals could be running a pick play. Harrison must have heard him. Because from the defensive line, he unexpectedly drops back into coverage, which Kurt Warner probably never expected, and takes it to the house. A huge point swing in the Steelers' favor. Give the Cardinals credit, though, because they climbed back into the game, and with just 2 minutes left, Larry Fitzgerald caught a pass over the middle and 64 yards through the steel curtain, giving Arizona a late game lead. Enter, though, Big Ben. 3 years earlier, the Steelers had won the Super Bowl largely in spite of him, and honestly got to this Super Bowl in spite of him with a putrid 17 touchdowns and 15 picks on the season. Now he had the whole field ahead of him, and he was ready to lead the drive that would define his career. Performing in these situations is what actually makes great quarterbacks. It builds legends. Roethlisberger found Santonio Holmes 3 times for 67 yards, and at the 6-yard line, Holmes will always be remembered for his final catch, but this catch and run to set that up equally important. And I hate to use the word destiny, especially when Big Ben is involved in the story, but he threw to Santonio Holmes again, just a bit too high in the end zone. I remember thinking during the game, Arizona needs to double this guy, Holmes, and had he made this catch, it would have been an all-timer. But with 43 seconds left, in Super Bowl 43, destiny called Holmes' number, and Roethlisberger feathered the ball in between 3 Cardinals defenders and found Holmes for the game-winning touchdown in the corner of the end zone. Arizona has 3 guys right here. None, though, in a position to make a play on the ball, and Holmes delivers one of, if not the most clutch toe-tapping catches I've ever seen in a game this big. That catch, plus his 9 receptions for 131 yards, got him Super Bowl MVP honors. Pittsburgh had won their 6th Super Bowl, and the Cinderella story for the Arizona Cardinals ended just short of a ring. And that is the 2008 NFL season, balls deep recapped. Thanks for watching That's Good Sports. Please subscribe here on YouTube for more balls deep episodes. We've done the 2015 season, a couple others. Feel free to check those out. And every week, NFL news and updates.